People who speak multiple languages. Have you had any funny instances where someone didn't expect you to understand their language? I am an American, but I speak a little Russian. A few years ago, I was in St. Petersburg and decided to take tickets for a boat to Peterhof. All the signs at the kiosk were in Russian, so I had no problem learning all the prices. However, it was obvious to me that I was not a local, so the cunning saleswoman decided to sell me tickets 3 times more expensive. In response to this insolence, I looked her straight in the eye and in pure Russian objected. But it is clearly written on the sign that one ticket costs X. You should have seen her reaction. Her jaw almost dropped. Her colleague was sitting next to her and was laughing at the top of her lungs. And she was laughing her ass off. As far as I know, this is a fairly common story in Russia. One price for locals, another for tourists. I'm walking with a German friend in Italy, and I warn him and German brother, you should not throw shit at people like that. If anyone here understands us. A woman walks next to us and adds, yeah, like me. There was a Chinese diner near our campus where everyone spoke Chinese. Even though I know Chinese too, I always spoke to them in English because I'm a bit shy about my accent. So I usually get rice and meat from them. But this time I already had rice ready at home, so I decided to go in purely for the meat. I go in, order without rice, give money. Then I hear the cashier yelling in Chinese to the kitchen staff, this fat asshole will only serve meat, no rice. I heard it very clearly and decided to add in Chinese, that's right, I have plenty of rice at home. Since then, they always give me extra, and by the way, they didn't charge me a penny for that order. My friend and I were trying to get home after drinking, but it was a long drive and we didn't have much money. So we found 2 other women who also needed to go the same way and offered to take a cab for all of us. They agreed, we hailed a cab, drove off. Suddenly they start speaking Swedish, not knowing that my friend is half Finnish and half Swedish. I understand Swedish too, but at that moment I was so drunk that I didn't care about anything. Suddenly I get a text from a friend. They're not going to pay for the cab. I say, maybe we should tell the driver. My friend turns to the driver and says, until these 2 ladies give me half, you're not letting them out. He took the hint, locked all the doors, and they still had to pay. I lived in South Korea for 3 years, but I didn't learn much Korean. But during that time, I met an English-speaking Korean woman who was considered not local by everyone because she was very tall and spoke with a strong American accent that came from studying in the US and New Zealand. So, when she went to an international university in South Korea, her professors thought she didn't speak Korean, so they often insulted her in front of her. She was very uncomfortable with this, but she didn't let it get to her and tolerated it for a year until it was time to graduate, until it was time for graduation. At graduation, she walked on stage in front of 800 people and gave her speech in perfect Korean, in which she casually reminded her professors how they called her a foreign pig. According to witnesses, one of the female teachers sobbed with shame right on the spot. I wish I had been there to see it. When I was 16 years old when I was working at a McDonald's, I got a Spanish-speaking group of people who didn't realize that I also spoke Spanish pretty well. Sometimes these guys would make very rude remarks to me in Spanish, but I pretended not to understand them. This went on until a few weeks into the job, when a manager came up to me and told me that he was valued more than me because he spoke 2 languages. To which I immediately told him in Spanish, cool. But I know 3. The dude just lost it when he realized I'd been listening to their conversations the whole time. I am half Peruvian and half Swiss, but I live in Peru. You can never tell from my appearance that there is something Swiss about me. One time I'm on the bus and I hear 2 Swiss women sitting behind me chatting about the attractiveness of Latinos. Suddenly one of them asks if her friend thinks I'm handsome. Without waiting for an answer, I abruptly turn to them and say, yeah, I was wondering the same thing. It was so hilarious. The expressions on their faces were priceless. Everything was there, shame and confusion. But now I have 2 new friends. Edit, they spoke Swiss German Schweizerdeutsch. Modified 2. They later confessed that they both found me attractive. I'm an American expat in Thailand, and I have a big beard, which that attracts a lot of attention. Locals, unaware that I understand them, sometimes like to yell in my direction, Look, a monkey. Monkey, do you want a banana? Or some other nasty thing. Usually I just ignore it since I don't want to talk to them, but there was one occasion when I couldn't take it. Charge. I was followed by two young girls about 14 years old and just pissed me off with comments about the monkey. All running around, yelling, pissing me off. I stopped, looked right at them, and said in plain Thai, "There are no blue-eyed monkeys. They have black eyes. Like yours." Their speech was lost in a second? While I was in Germany, an English teacher I know she teaches middle school invited me to come to school for one of her classes. She introduced me to the students, and I said hello and that I was from the United States and was happy to be in her class. Next, my friend says, "Guys, you can ask him questions in English. What do you think Americans are like?" Some kid in the front desk decided to quip in German fat and stupid. He wanted to do it quietly, but it was so that everyone could hear it. The teacher blushes. The students are laughing. I don't know what to do and quickly switch to German, you write. Also, a lot of Americans speak German. The kid there almost shits himself. In that second, he looked like a little deer that accidentally wandered onto the stage during a Beyoncé concert. He really thought there was no way Americans could understand German. My friends and I once went to the mall to buy some clothes. While I was in the fitting room, two female store employees were standing next to me and were really shitting on me in Spanish. They were unhappy that I was taking too long to change my clothes, called me a stupid gringo foreigner, and occasionally poked fun at me, asking me in English if I needed help, only they were unaware that I had Spanish roots. So when I came out of the fitting room and told them in plain Spanish that no, I didn't need any help, they were so embarrassed. My aunt and I were going on vacation to a resort. We were sitting at the airport chatting in Finnish, waiting for the flight. My aunt has a broken leg, so she is in a wheelchair all the time. Important note, even though we are both Finnish, my aunt has been living in Germany for several years and is fluent in German. I've also lived there for a while, but my language skills are worse. So, it's boarding time. The flight attendant sees that my aunt is in a stroller and suggests that we go first. There is a disgruntled German couple standing nearby, and you can hear the husband say to his wife, "I think disabled people should be banned from flying on airplanes altogether." My reckless aunt asks me to slow down. I was pushing her stroller, turns around to this man, and replies in perfect German, "I'm sorry, sir, but no fracture is capable of robbing me of my vacation. And what you said is very insulting to the disabled. I'm truly sorry about your wife. Have a good flight." Without uttering a word, the man blushed and turned away. His wife was shocked. I'm Spanish, but I don't look like that. I have light skin, blonde hair, and green eyes. When I lived in London, I got into a lot of funny situations. My favorite is when I was riding the subway from work one day. Anyway, there was a big soccer match that day, Chelsea versus Barcelona, and I found myself on the subway with a couple of fans who were on their way to the game. At one point, the subway came to an abrupt stop. I couldn't help myself and fell a little bit on one of them. And since I didn't know they were Spanish, I apologized to the guy in English. Let's keep going. He's been savoring the situation for about 5 minutes in Spanish. There are phrases like, "I wish that fat cum had hit the floor." Soon we get to their stop, because they get off the subway, still making fun of me. And I shout, "Have a great game," shitheads at them in plain Spanish. They're shocked. The door closes right in their face. God, that must have made me high for a week. My stepmother's story. She grew up in Japan, speaks Japanese, but looks like a white Italian. She's only a quarter Japanese and doesn't look like a typical Asian woman at all. One time she decided to give her friends a little bachelorette party and took them to a salon for manicures and pedicures. The women who worked at the beauty salon spoke Japanese and mostly discussed men, gossiping and all that. But when it came to my stepmother's pedicure, they abruptly switched to her. The thing is, she's not the slimmest woman, and her feet aren't exactly model feet. The girls realized this and started making fun of her in Japanese, of course. They giggled and enjoyed the fact that someone was less fortunate than they were. The stepmother said she didn't want to react in any way at first, but after 5 minutes of continuous thrash talk, her patience ran out, and she finally responded in their language, "You know, I didn't realize this place only catered to princesses. Maybe not word for word, but something like that. The smiles on the faces of the female workers were abruptly replaced by an endless sense of guilt. They apologized in English and didn't say another word until the procedure was over. I had a funny experience in Japan. I was walking down the street and I heard, "Oh, look how hot he is." And he's blue-eyed. My self-esteem skyrocketed. I turned my head to look at my adoring girlfriends, and they're little 13-year-old schoolgirls who looked even younger because Asians, you know. It wasn't so nice after that. I lived in Korea for a while. I went to get a haircut. The hairdresser's assistant put me in the chair, prepared me for the haircut, and I heard her say to the hairdresser, "Wow, he looks like a baby." I was 22 at the time, but I really looked very young. I was 22 at the time, but I did look very young. To which I ask, "Who? Do I look like a baby?" She became very embarrassed and abruptly ran off somewhere. But the hairdresser found out that I understood Korean, so we switched to that. I'm Brazilian, but I speak English from an early age, so I can pass for American if I don't talk too much. One day I had to fly from Atlanta to Rio. At the airport, I met two very pretty girls who spoke excellent English and were flying with their mom. As I found out later, they were Americans with Brazilian roots and also thought I was just an American. We chatted for a bit, exchanged pleasantries, and it turned out that one of the girls had a ticket for the seat next to me. Then we get on the plane. I put my luggage on the shelf, and I hear these girls' mom saying to them in Portuguese, "Poor thing, he thinks I'm going to let him fly with one of you." To which I turn to her and reply also in Portuguese, "Don't worry, ma'am. I have a girlfriend, so I'm more than happy to share this flight with you." She's like, "Oh," and she sat there the whole flight without saying a word. Ahaha. I don't speak much Spanish, but I understand everything with no problem. I used to deal in used cars in Houston, and, as you may have guessed, I ran into Spanish people a lot. They never asked me if I spoke Spanish, because I look like a typical white guy who knows nothing but English. It was funny to watch couples come up to me and discuss their price gouging schemes right in front of me. I always knew their devious tactics and how much they were actually willing to pay. I often overheard phrases like, "I'll try to get $1,000 off, but if he'll agree to at least $500, then we'll take it anyway." After we stopped at some price, I would wait for the right moment to get into their conversation and show that I understood them all along. As a rule, after doing that, the guys would always freak out and you could read on their faces, AHRB, ORDER. Those moments were priceless.